Back, and today we're going to be talking about the news that we heard yesterday about, once again, Dolphins Tyreek Hill and the serious dispute that he's in right now. And this could be the nail in the coffin for him in terms of his tenure in Miami. And it's, a small chance, but potentially maybe the nail in the coffin of his NFL career. We're going to be reading just quickly a few paragraphs in the article that came out about the domestic dispute. It says police were called to the home of Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill and his wife for a domestic dispute Monday, although no charges were filed. According to the Sunny Isles Beach Police Department reports, officers responded to a call from Hill's mother-in-law, who told them Hill was, quote, very aggressive and impulsive, and that she was afraid of her for her daughter, unquote. According to the Hill's mother-in-law, Hill and his wife, Kita Vaccaro, got into an argument and threw her laptop on the floor before grabbing their four-month-old daughter and heading to the balcony of their 35th floor apartment. Vaccaro told responding officers that she and Hill had been attending couples therapy due to their frequent arguments, but that it hadn't worked, and adding that she was in the process of filing divorce. She said Monday's argument began when she told Hill that he was not involved enough in their daughter's life. According to TMZ, Hill was served divorce papers Tuesday. Hill and Vaccaro told officers that their argument Monday was not physical, but officers noted a visible bruise on Vaccaro's chest. She told officers that she probably sustained the bruise when Hill took their daughter at the beginning of their argument, and she described it as as an accident, I should say. I'll leave a link, down below for YouTube or Twitter for the rest of the article. But this is, I agree with everyone that kind of on Twitter or YouTube when I watch videos people talking about this, that enough's enough, and this is time for the Miami Dolphins to move off of Tyreek Hill, and I completely agree with that. It's just at this point it's just more trouble than he's worth. If you want to see, this is the absolute perfect scenario what's going on here. If you hate Tyreek Hill, well, I'm gone, because if you just want to look at it as the production standpoint on the field as well, if you want to add on to that, and it's a horrible timing for Tyreek Hill from his perspective. We look at his stats here, it's by far the worst that he's had in his Miami time there. It's not even close to what he's replicated, or close to replicating what he did in 2022 and 2023. I mean, prior to 2024, he was voted the number one player in the NFL. He's the Offensive Player of the Year, back-to-back 1,700-yard seasons with just 1 yard shy of 1,800 yards receiving. He was by far one of the best, if not to some people's opinions, the best wide receiver in the NFL. And this year, if you want to blame it on the quarterback situation with two of his injuries, Tyreek Hill himself maybe slowing down and so forth. I mean, I don't know what you want to pin it on, but it was a complete fall off compared to his standards the last two seasons. And you have to add in the fact of the ending of it as well, kind of pulling himself out of the game on week 18 when he ultimately found out that the game was meaningless at that point. They weren't going to make the playoffs. Didn't want to try. And, of course, post-game, the talks about him wanting to leave Miami and so forth. And, of course, it kind of, snowballs into where we're at now. It's a lot. It's a lot for my Dolphins to deal with. I'm sure it's exhausting for the organization, the coach, to constantly deal with this, constantly talk, answer questions about it. And I'm sure they're having dialogue about this and discussing, is this the time to move off of Tyreek Hill? Because, again, I mean, you look at the production-wise, it's not great. Now, again, I don't think he fell off a cliff, but this is certainly ammunition for that for that topic of moving off of him. That's certainly a valid point to make because of the huge drop-off with that. If you care about also the contract situation too, about getting rid of him, the repercussions of it, post June 1st, if they trade him, they would lose $598,000. If they release him outright, they would lose $29.2 million. If you waited post June 1st, release would be negative 13.6. Trade would be, they would save 14.9. And if you care about if they kept them for the 2025 season, wait until next off season, there's a lot more savings into it. Regardless of, there's not really too much of a difference between post and or pre and post June 1st. 36.3 pre June 1st. Post is 39.1. But at this point, there should be a huge discussion again of getting rid of them, as well as if you care about. For Pro Football Focus, what I always use a lot of, and the rankings for the overall grades, again, objective if you care about it, but was ranked 43rd in the NFL with 72.7. For his receiving grade, 28th with 77.3. And then for the season stats, was not even the top 10. Not even the top 15 for anything, really. Targets was 16th, receptions was 17th, receiving yards was 27th, receiving touchdowns was 28th. You look at the targets as well. That was the closest he got to the top 15, was 16th with targets. Outside of that, in receptions, 17th as well. but it's a mess there. That's the only way to really put it in that situation. It's a mess what's going on with Miami and Tua, and I don't want to say this is a one-for-one comparison because Stephon Diggs didn't have the off-the-field issues at all, but it just came to the point of having a star receiver just being more trouble than he's worth. And you look at Stephon Diggs as well, when his last year in Buffalo was the least productive. I mean, overall, in terms of the receiving yards, he was starting to slow down towards the end, and I think that was more so the offense phasing him out and not prioritizing him as much as they used to, as opposed to, of course, him just falling off a cliff with that. But you saw, again, they were pushing him out. They weren't utilizing him as much. It was more of the everyone eats mentality that I'm sure you've heard throughout this past season. And at that point, they took a huge cap hit with him. They took a huge dead cap on for them, and they said, you know what, it's too much trouble than it's worth. They had to trade a pick alongside Stephon Diggs to get a second round pick. But you look at the situation now and what happened this year with Houston, with him going down with the injury, you look at that and say, wow, that was a huge steal for Buffalo's part of getting a second round pick for Stephon Diggs when Houston only got, 7-8 games out of him at most. So you look at the Miami at this point, and you're probably looking at most that same return for Tyreek Hill if you do try to trade him, but you have to add picks alongside it as well, and I won't be surprised if they had to get that second round pick. But you're looking at, again, second, third round pick. You look at some of these older receivers, that's relatively where it is. Devontae Adams was a third round pick. Keenan Allen was a fourth round pick. Stephon Diggs, like we talked about, was a second round pick. Amari Cooper, if you want to throw him in that conversation, was a third round pick. So you're looking at all these older wide receivers. That's what you're going to get. And I think for Tyreek Hill, at the very least, I think you can get a second round pick, but you're going to have to add compensation alongside him for a team to consider that. And I don't have a list of teams where you can go to. That's not really important as much right now. Just talking about Tyreek Hill's future. That could be a different discussion for a later time. But from Miami Dolphins' perspective, that's why I kind of view it as for Stephon Diggs for the Bills. It's a addition by subtraction, where yes, you are losing a huge talent, one of the best receivers I think still in the NFL, but it's just too much trouble than it's worth with dealing with the off the field issues and even on the field issues at times. Well, again, like the end of the season, just him taking himself out of the game and then kind of come out and saying, you know what, I'm done in Miami, and having that big dispute as well. I think they are more fine with moving forward with Jalen Waddle as their wide receiver one. I think he's more incapable of being that. Sure, you're going to have to add more pieces around him, and that kind of goes into the 13th overall pick or their first round pick with who they should select, because you have Teron Armstead, who also retired. So do you prioritize the offensive line there, which for Tua's health he should, but you also have Matthew Golden, who is that speed receiver. Maybe you take him there, or maybe you go later in the draft, or you try and sign someone, whoever is out there, still free agency, for whoever you want to pin him for Miami. But at least for receivers, it's not the end of the world. Like, could they take a hit this year and not be as good as the years past? Sure. But at this point, I think it's a growing pain they have to go through, and it's going to suck. It's going to be maybe tough on the cap. Not as much if they trade them, again, just under $600,000 against the cap to do so. But at this point, it's move on. Try and clean house there. I mean, they're already kind of starting to lose players because of age and the cap situation and so forth, and obviously issues for players as well. But I think the best step for Miami is just getting rid of these players and starting over. And I think they could take a huge step forward in their the team's development and team success right there. It's unfortunate because, again, Tyreek Hill is a absolute phenomenal talent. And, I view it as similar to Antonio Brown, immense talent, but just too much baggage, too much controversy, too much discussions for the wrong reasons, and that's the unfortunate part. He's an amazing player, and it sucks that he's put himself in this situation and he has all these issues because it can be so much better for him, and it's unfortunately he has a track record of that with going all the way back to college. He had issues in Kansas City. He had issues. Miami's had issues, and there's no doubt about whatever next said team you want to say he goes to, he's going to have problems there as well. So it's just something you have to, similar to Antonio Brown, something you just have to live with and hope that you could try and, control him to a certain point of, try and keep away from the bad stuff and hope that it, doesn't happen. But unfortunately, it's inevitable. I think at this point, anywhere he goes, that something's going to happen, and you're just going to have to deal with the consequences with that. So from Miami Dolphins' perspective, I think, I agree with a lot of people who are screaming it is I get rid of them. I think it's time. You may not like the cap situation for that, but it's more trouble than it's worth, and take the hit, the small hit at this point, for like I said, for the trade, and move on from him. So we'll see what Miami Dolphins does for the rest of the offseason. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they kept him and wait till next year. I mean, I don't want to say they're desperate, but again, for me, for their perspective, you kind of see it's too tough. It's too tough to pass to move off of a player like that. So again, we'll see what the rest of the offseason happens, especially post June 1st if they decide to wait at that point and move off of Tyreek Hill. So we'll see where the remainder of the offseason happens between him and Tyreek Hill, if he stays or he is traded or let go.